The Book of Mormon proves that the Bible is true. The Book of Mormon, best attested miracle in the history of the world, proves that the Bible is true and divine. I own several copies of the Holy Bible. I use several different versions, but all of them are based on the arrangement of ancient books that became traditional at the end of the 4th century, in accordance with general agreements among scholars in the early Dark Ages with regard to the books and other ancient documents that were believed worthy of inclusion. The version that I use most frequently was translated into the English language by agents of King James of England, who consulted the oldest, best preserved, and most trusted copies and fragments available to them in the 17th century. When we consider all of the various versions and translations into multiple languages during the past 1600 years, there can be no doubt that the Holy Bible is the single most influential collection of documents ever gathered within a single cover. However, there are billions of people in the world today that do not accept the God described in the Bible. They doubt the miracles described in the Bible. They have serious doubts about the authenticity of the ancient records, and they point out that none of the original manuscripts are even available for comparison. They question whether the prophecies that claim to have been written before the ancient events that they describe may actually have been written, edited, or embellished after the fact. They scoff at the notion of resurrection from the dead, and at descriptions of the divine power of the Ark of the Covenant, or of the Urim, or of the Thummim, or of manna falling from heaven, asking, where are these sacred treasures today? Where, they ask, is the evidence? Do you believe in God as described in the Bible? Do you believe in the Bible? Do you have friends that do not? Would you like to help them to believe? Would you like to have further evidence to believe it yourself? Well, as Latter-day Saints within the Church of Jesus Christ in these modern times, we are now able to declare to the world with confidence that we have that evidence. The Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is an amazing and significant body of ancient writing, and witnesses and discoveries in modern times prove its authenticity. It confirms that the God described in the Bible is not just the God of Israel, but also the God of all mankind. It proves that the Bible is of divine origin. It proves that prophetic documents published in modern versions of the Bible have been accurately preserved and transcribed without significant corruption since ancient times. Most of the text within the Book of Mormon was written in the 4th century A.D. With help from God and angels, the text was unearthed in America in 1827 and published in 1829. The circumstances of its publication are so remarkable, and the evidence of its superhuman origin and preservation is so strong that it has been accepted as true and divine by millions of people. There is no earthly explanation that can fully account for the existence of the Book of Mormon, but there is a great deal of evidence to indicate that that 1829 edition was of superhuman origin. We'll get to that compelling evidence later, after a brief summary of the contents. The Book of Mormon contains a complex religious history covering more than 1,000 years. There's a great deal of information, but the primary narrative commences with the true story of two Jewish families living in Jerusalem just after the time of the prophet Jeremiah, when their king, Zedekiah, got into political conflict with Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, so that a destructive war was imminent. God led these two families away from the war with a single precious copy of the Old Testament, as it was known in those days, and across the oceans to America, in time to be saved from the destruction that came to most of the other Jews. Their descendants came upon and intermixed with other ancient American cultures. They subdivided into different warring nations, some of whom were illiterate. But for more than 1,000 years, there were always at least a few that could read and write in Hebrew dialects, using Middle Eastern characters deriving from Egyptian, and that remained faithful and retained a detailed knowledge of the God of Israel. While the surviving Jews in the Middle East dwindled in unbelief and suffered a diminishing understanding of the Messiah to the point where they crucified Jesus of Nazareth when he appeared, this small group of Jews in America grew in their understanding of the Messiah. They continued the ancient pattern of the Old Testament people, living an undistorted law of Moses, and adding their own sacred records so that their version of the Old Testament grew for 600 years. The additional information not found in our popular Old Testament is entirely consistent with it, quotes from it, and confirms the divinity and general accuracy of modern Bible translations. Because of the abundance of durable gold in their newfound lands, their most important historical and religious writings were carefully preserved by a score of different men spanning a period of 10 centuries on thin, corruption-resistant gold sheets. But this collection grew unwieldy until it was abridged, edited, and summarized into a more manageable size, still on thin gold sheets by a prophet, author, and military historian named Mormon. Mormon's abridgment became the basis for today's Book of Mormon, and it reveals that prophets in ancient America knew of Jesus. They knew that he was the Messiah. They were aware when he was born in Palestine, and they were painfully alerted at the time when the Palestinian Jews tortured him to death. Some of them were so faithful that Jesus himself visited them personally in ancient America after his resurrection. He was seen there by thousands. They knew with absolute certainty of his physical resurrection because he showed them the wounds in his hands and side that had resulted when he had sacrificed his life for all mankind. He examined and approved their records and made sure that they wrote down and preserved what he told them. Jesus spent at least several days walking among this faithful group of ancient Americans, repeating the same teachings and many of the same parables and sermons that were recorded by his apostles and disciples in what we now call the New Testament section of the Bible. The Savior's teachings had a profound effect on these people. For more than 200 years, they enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity. Unfortunately, they were unable to handle prosperity very well, and eventually it turned to greed and corruption. Their descendants abandoned the teachings of Jesus and sought additional wealth and power through conquest and deceit. Eventually, just after Mormon was killed in battle in 385 A.D., their entire civilization was defeated and driven to extinction. Mormon's son, named Moroni, survived for at least 36 years beyond Mormon's death, avoiding contact with other hostile civilizations as he finished Mormon's book, adding several chapters at the end. By way of instruction to whoever might find the record, he added one final page as he buried the book, and these words come from that final page.